Welcome back. Hopefully everyone is now caffeinated and ready to rock. Now I have the dubious pleasure of welcoming you to our very own game show, where we get to have a little fun with our surprisingly agreeable experts and put them to the test. So this is time to play a little game we call Prove It. Let's invite Elke, Bob, Shaz, and Eric back to the stage. Round of applause for our contestants. So I could stand up here and tell you about some of the strategies for behavior-centered design that we use and share some of the fascinating research that informs them. But what more fun way for us all to learn than to put some of the world's leading experts on the spot and ask them to explain some things they've spent their entire careers researching in ways that we all can understand. What could go wrong? Okay, let me tell you how it works. First, we convinced some of the greatest minds we know to come on stage and play a silly game with us. Okay. Check. In each round, I'll read a very brief statement to explain a key behavior-centered design principle. And then I'll say to our experts, prove it. At that point, they can buzz in to fascinate us with research insights that elucidate the claim in a way that we, their pupils, can understand. But the real test is they have to do it in 60 seconds or less, and they can't use any big, complicated jargon that none of us understand. At the end of 60 seconds, they'll see time's up, or we'll all see time's up on the screen and hear a buzz. And at that point, one more contestant, if they'd like, may take a crack at adding some of their own insight. We'll play 6 rounds, or as long as it takes for all of them to get fed up and walk off stage, whichever comes first. I should also note that none of these contestants have seen these statements in advance, and I even offered. Okay. Yeah. Pay close attention, because at the end of the game, you're in charge. The audience will vote for who among them is the most benevolent genius. Ooh. Genius for their knowledge, benevolent for their ability to impart it upon the rest of us. The winner, of course, will receive eternal fame and glory as their reward. Okay, without further ado, let's begin. Contestants, please remember to wait until you hear the words "prove it" to buzz in. Ready? First up, leverage the power of emotions like pride. We like to feel proud. The intrinsic motivation that comes from the possibility of being proud can have a bigger impact on our choices than avoiding the possibility of feeling shame. Prove it. I kind of knew that was going to happen.
Take it away.
Take it away, Elke.
Well, it just so happened that one of my students, Claudia Schneider, and I and a couple of other people did a study on this a couple of years ago. And so we basically asked people to anticipate how they would feel if they made a series of environmental decisions, either telling them to anticipate how prideful, how proud they would feel if they did this behavior, or how guilty they would feel if they didn't do these behaviors. And there was no question in the world, despite the fact that the prospect theory and loss aversion tells us maybe negative emotions should play a larger role in motivating behavior, that people were much more likely to engage in subsequent environmental behaviors when we had prime pride rather than guilt.
That was in 35 seconds. Anyone? I think Bob wants to jump in and add.
I endorse all of that, but I would want to caution people not to conclude from that guilt and shame are unimportant. We have seen all too clearly what happens when people in high places seem incapable of experiencing those emotions.
Oh, well said. Thank you. Okay, moving right along. Next up, promote the desirable norm. When we don't know what to do, we follow the herd. Part of being a social animal means that we often base our behavior on the norms of our group. Just knowing what those norms are can make a big difference in the decisions we make. Prove it. We'll give it to Eric.
Okay, this is actually a great area because there's a lot of evidence. You all know the famous studies where you tell people X% of the people hang up their towels and recycle. people who stay in that room are more likely to. Now, that's a great story. What I love about this area is there have been attempts to look at dozens of studies. Because don't believe just any one study. But what these show is there's a strong and very reliable norm effect. So it's really science the way it should work. Not one study, but a bunch of studies that show you the same thing. So as someone who's using these tools, it's important to know it works across lots of areas.
Great. Bob, did you want to? Oh.
The evidence I'm familiar with has to do with social contagion generally. If you don't want your kids to smoke, it's way more important that not many of their friends smoke than whatever you might think to tell them about the subject. If you're in the military and you're sent to a new place where the obesity rate is higher than the obesity rate where you were, you're much more likely to become obese yourself in the next months after you're sent there.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, next. Increase behavioral observability. As social animals, we care about the effect that our behavior has on our reputation. So making our own behavior more observable can help us lean toward those behaviors that improve our reputation. Prove it. Shaz.
So I can, I guess my answer to that is also related to social norms. Actually showing people not just what the norm is, especially if the norm is wrong, it's showing people what the dynamic norm is. So we don't have a lot of vegetarians around, and telling people that the norm is increasing, having more vegetarians can actually change the way people behave is really powerful. So when you show people that, people are much more likely to change their behavior. So that type of behavioral observation can actually help a lot.
Terrific. Any additions, or she just nailed it?
That's good.
Nice. Okay, next one is harness reciprocity. We have the innate tendency to return favors, and we feel guilty when we don't. This is the psychological drive that pushes groups towards harmony and cooperation. By giving an unconditional gift or favor, we can elicit the urge to cooperate. Prove it. Bob.
Studies have shown that if you're trying to get people to respond to a survey, if you put a coin or some other thing of value in the request letter, they're much more likely to respond to the survey. And there are many other findings like that.
Great. Shaz?
What's also really interesting is how do you get people to cooperate, especially in social dilemmas where private interests are at odds with collective interests, is by showing a lot of reciprocity. So if I start by cooperating, others will cooperate too. So this is like a tit-for-tat strategy, which is really powerful as well.
These are incredibly concise. Okay, next. Strengthen group identity and choose the right messenger. Kind of a twofer. We all identify with many different groups, and we like to cooperate with those with whom we identify. So just strengthening the extent to which we identify with a certain group can improve the ease with which we cooperate in that group, especially if the messenger is someone from our in-group. Prove it.
One of my former students just published a paper showing that in high school, if the high status kids smoke, that affects the tendency to smoke of all other students for a period of at least 10 years. That's as far as the data set went. Betsy Levy-Palak has research showing that if you can enlist the cooperation of high status people in a high school social network in a campaign against bullying, it's much more effective than if you enlist anyone else's help.
Great, thank you. Shaz, take it away.
So what's also really cool is that last week we had the march originating from the children, and that is a messenger that's not from academia, not from NGOs, which is really powerful. So especially for climate change, we need messengers that are all across the board, sort of like, and to use some of the language that Elke Weber has talked about, we need silver buckshot of messengers as opposed to single silver bullets of messengers. I stole that one. All yours.
That's good collusion. Okay, last one. Simplify messages and choices. We prefer simplicity and get confounded by too many choices. So much so that we even go so far as to avoid making a decision at all. We don't like to have to make too many decisions or sift through too much information. We need to make the preferred choice as simple and clear as possible. Prove it. I had a feeling that one was going to be Eric.
So sometimes the best choice is to not give people a choice. If they know what they want to do, give them the default option. But we know that the more options that you give people, the less likely they are to take any action. So if my favorite example, at Utah, when they gave the Affordable Care Act, they gave people 156 different insurance policies. That seems wrong to me. New York was closer with 8. And you get much more involvement. People don't tune out, they choose. And they make better choices with smaller sets within reason. And so that's important.
Thank you. Shaz, you were second.
All right, so I actually showed you today that rather than teaching people about how much energy different appliances use, I can just tell you large appliances that heat and cool use a lot more energy than you think. And I showed you the data where you can just provide people with a very simple message about what to do, and they'll actually understand that much better than teaching them about how energy physics works and then getting them to that stage.
Great. Thank you. So they told me backstage that they were going to play a joke on me and buzz in and say that there wasn't any evidence for any of these claims. So I'm grateful that they didn't do that. Okay, how's that for going back to school? Like I said, surprisingly agreeable. Now it's your turn to decide who among us is the Prove It champion. We just need you to take out your phones and take a quick vote using the instructions on the screen. We'll give you just a minute to submit your votes.
You know, it's un-American to only have one prize.
That's right. You have to stand here while they do that.
I feel so let me out of here.
High stakes on the line. Shout out to the fellow who also helped us invent this game, Toby Park. Okay, time is up. Let's see who our winner is. Moment of truth. Shaz!
Yeah, all right. Woohoo, thank you.
Heroic effort. Thanks for joining today's episode of Prove It. Round of applause again for all of our contestants. You are dismissed.